Hi, and welcome to the Galaxy watercolor tutorial. Let's first go over the materials you'll need. First, you'll need watercolor paper, painter's tape, some paper towels, something to cover your work surface and protect it when we get to the splattering the stars part. One paintbrush. Don't obsess about the size, but in this case I'm using a 12. I wouldn't go smaller than a 4 because it will take longer. An old toothbrush is optional. You will need something to use as a palette. You can use a plate, a plastic palette, butcher's tray. You will need 1 or 2 glasses of water. For your stars, you will need either gouache or white acrylic paint. Then for the watercolors, you can use cheap watercolors like you would get at the dollar store. You can use expensive artist quality colors or liquid colors. If you're looking liquid colors, go for a deep blue like aquamarine or phthalo blue, a magenta, and a purple or a violet. So the first thing we're going to do is take our sheet of watercolor paper and tape it to the table. You can either put the painter's tape straight on, or to make it a little less sticky, you can stick it to your clothing, peel it off, and then put it around the edge of your paper. This will give us a white border around the edge, but most importantly, it will keep the paper from warping too terribly much and curling up. Now, we're going to test our watercolors. For this, we're going to be using blue. We're going to be using purple. And if you have a red, that's a good red that we can dilute to make a pink, we'll be using pink. Now, what do we mean by testing watercolors? Well, if you're using cheap watercolors, the pigments aren't pure, and when you mix them, you may not get a pure color. So you can see when I'm mixing this red and blue, I'm not getting a pretty purple like the purple. I'm getting sort of a muddy brown color with a little bit of red to it. That's because this red has a bit of orange in it. That results in a muddy color. If you have that, then you can do this just with the purple and blue. You'll also want to mix your purple and red and your purple and blue. So the purple and blue from this set mix fine, but that red, because of the orange in it, doesn't mix with anything. Now, once you've decided what colors you're using, you're going to take water and cover this whole piece of paper. Yes, all of it. You're not looking for a standing puddle, but it should sort of shine as being wet. Unfortunately, with our webcam, we can't really get a good look at it from the side. But if you bend your head down sideways and look at it, you'll be able to tell what's wet and what's not. Then we are going to take our color. I'll be using blue. And we are just going to brush a huge swatch of blue. And huge areas of purple. Now, you'll see that where they mingle, you get sort of lacy patterns, and you'll get these circles as well if you drop water on it or where it bleeds into each other. That lacy pattern of it, that border, is called a bloom. And this is one of the few projects where you really want watercolor blooms. A lot of people spend a lot of time fighting them, trying to get rid of them. This project, the more blooms, the more depth the final picture will have. And then I'm going to go over here, fill that in. And I'm not worrying about how dark or how light it is. Light is fine on this first coat. Dark is fine too. And then any place where I have too straight a line or too hard a line, I'm just going to drop in a little water and bleed it around. White areas are okay if you have them. They're okay if you not have them. If you feel like anything is too dark, you can take your paper towel, blot up some of the color, and do it over. But you can never completely erase watercolor. You'll always have a trace of those underlying layers showing through. And in this project, that is what gives us depth. So now we sit and we wait for it to dry. Or if you're impatient, you can grab a blow dryer and hit it with a blow dryer. Once your painting is dry, going to look it over and look at what you like and don't like. I've got some interesting blooms in this part here, around here, and in this section here. This section here has a hard edge that I really don't like, and this area over here is kind of boring. So you can either go over it with more of the same color to make it deeper, or you can do a different color. Now, I did not put water on first this time, so I'm getting a really thick cloud of paint. And then I'm coming back with water and thinning the edge to let that sort of bleed on out to what's already there. And as it goes out, the capillary action makes those blooms we had before. You can also do what we did before and put down just clear water first, and then go back and drop on more paint, really intense, and let it bleed on out. Once again, you're going to let this dry, and you're going to want it to dry completely before you peel up the tape. Wait until your picture is completely dry before removing the tape. Remove the tape by pulling it slowly and keeping it as close to the picture as possible. You also want to pull away from the image, not towards. This is so that if and when it does tear, you lose as little of the picture as possible. Okay, you can see it started to tear here, but because I'm keeping it close and pulling away, that tear ran towards the edge and is pretty much invisible. If I had been pulling towards the picture, it would have torn where the paint is and been obvious. And please feel free to go a lot slower than I'm going. I've painted, I don't know how many watercolors. Just for this one video, I've painted this one watercolor 6 times. After a while, you start feeling when the tear's happening, or seeing that first little fleck of white, and you slow up. Also, because I have 6 versions of this same painting, I'm a little less worried about preserving this one. Ah, here's a bad tear. Okay, see how, since I slowed up and pulled away, here's another one. There we go. I was able to save the picture itself and keep the picture itself from tearing. If you pull up before it's completely dry, you will probably end up with paint on your skin, and the picture will warp more. Before you put in your stars, put down a trash bag or some newspaper, something to protect your kitchen table from splatters. You're going to want your picture to be completely dry. Otherwise, when you do your stars, the color on the lower levels will bleed through. If you do not let the picture completely dry before taking it up, you'll see this one is fairly flat. This one is pretty curved because I took the picture up while it was still wet. So it does not want to lay down flat. To do your stars, you're going to want something to use as a palette. If you're using gouache, you can shake up the bottle well and put it down straight out of the bottle. If you are using craft paint, white acrylic, you will probably have to thin it down. If your paint water looks like this, your stars will not be white. Dump your water, get a clean glass of it, and rinse your brush thoroughly. Put a daub of white paint down, and you're going to want to thin that to about the texture and thickness of whole milk. That means it should be liquid, but still opaque, not a paste. So I'm going to have to add a lot more water. You want to add it a little at a time, because while you can add more, taking water out again means waiting for it to dry the long way. Don't try to dry your paint palette out with a blow dryer, just don't. I've done it before and it has never been pretty. Okay, so when you think you have it the right thickness, if you have something and it goes on opaque but still splatters, that's pretty good. You can also paint it across your thumbnail. It's not focusing well. You want it to go across the thumbnail without vanishing into the and creeping over the little crevices and lines that are the natural texture of the nail. And you take your picture and your paint, load your brush up, and just tap it. This will get you your large stars. If you have too much paint, you will end up with lines. So let's do this with less paint on the brush, a little more carefully. Wiping most of the paint off the brush and trying again. There, you see. This gives us nice big stars and some little ones. I mentioned earlier using a toothbrush. My toothbrushes that I use for paint, I cut most of the handle off so I don't mistake them for anything else. Dab some paint on it and just flick it over your painting. This gives you a spray of really tiny stars, more of a mist almost. If you don't feel you have enough paint, not getting enough stars, go back, get more paint. This painting was from the liquid watercolors. You see I've got some really dark purple, and that shows up the splatter and spray of the fine mist of stars really well. So as I mentioned, I did this project multiple times. Let's have a look. This one I did with professional quality watercolors in the traditional hard form. This one I did with the liquid watercolors, and I think it gave me the darkest and most intense colors. And these two I did with the cheap set of watercolors I got off of online, or that you could pick up at a dollar store. Even using the cheap colors, they came out really nice. I'd be completely happy. This one I made every mistake possible on. This one is actually my favorite of the lot. I'm thinking about photocopying it or scanning it and then using it for cards. I hope you've enjoyed, and thank you for watching.